Another way to alter velocities in real time is via a MIDI plugin, specifically the Velocity Processor plugin. This script-generated plugin operates on a per-track basis. It offers 3 ways to tweak velocity in real time and can be saved as part of a channel strip setting or a patch. Add scale is pretty much the same as the region inspector method, with scale equivalent to dynamics and add equivalent to the velocity offset. Value range either sets a fixed velocity, which you could also do in the inspector, or sets a velocity range with high and low velocity limits. This could be helpful if, say, a few loud notes ring out too much, or a few soft notes get lost in a patch that otherwise responds well in the middle of the velocity range, limiting the minimum and maximum velocities without compressing the range in between. Compress Expand lets you visually dial up a velocity curve, which can be helpful, especially if you're used to the kind of I/O graph often found in compressors. The visual feedback can help you dial up a curve that targets problem areas in the velocity response. Finally, if you did want to permanently alter the note velocities, you could dial up a velocity curve in the Transform window. Here, you can set the transformer to act on note velocities, choosing a logarithmic or exponential response, which often does the trick, or even creating a custom velocity curve via the Map option. All of these methods for tweaking velocity response can also be used in real time, acting on velocity values as you play live or record MIDI into Logic. The inspector velocity parameters can be applied to incoming MIDI if you open up the region inspector and make dynamics and velocity settings without having a region selected. You can play through those settings live, hearing the resulting effect they have on velocity response, and if you record a MIDI performance, the velocity processing is still non-destructive. It's implemented in the newly recorded region's inspector settings, where it can be further tweaked or even turned off. The Velocity Processor MIDI plugin is also real-time. Once again, you can play through it, and as long as you leave it active on the track after recording, you'll have the same non-destructive tweaked velocity curve on playback. While the Transform window does change the actual note velocities of selected notes, there's a real-time Transform object available in the environment, which can be applied to incoming MIDI, and, depending on where you patch it in, can record the altered velocities. I have this set up in my Logic template, mostly in case I have to play my customized instruments on a keyboard with a lighter response than the weighted keyboard they're set up for, which can make it difficult to control instrument dynamics without maxing out. It's a little more tweaky to set up, since it has to be added in the environment, which most people tend to avoid. But here's a quick look at how to do it. In the Environment Clicks and Ports layer, the physical input object represents your hardware MIDI controllers, all MIDI input into Logic. Normally, it's patched almost directly to the sequencer input object, which represents the currently record-enabled MIDI or instrument track. Inserting a transformer object in between will pass all incoming MIDI through it on the way to being monitored and recorded, and here you can dial up a real-time velocity curve. I use the exponential logarithmic option, since that makes it easy to quickly find a curve that'll adapt a keyboard with unweighted keys to a patch set up for the velocity response from weighted keys, or vice versa, or to simply adapt to a different player's touch on the keys, in case I have a guest performer in the studio. I got fancy and set up additional controls to make it easier to select different curves, but just setting up the basic transformer is easy enough. Since most of Logic's instruments, especially EXS, don't offer a dedicated velocity curve setting as part of an instrument preset, the ability to tweak that very important parameter in a variety of ways is one of the things I find particularly useful in Logic's flexible architecture.